opinion of crime. Tonight on 1919 News, we have the scoop on the latest happenings with the case Abrams versus the United States. Hello, my name is Meredith Bellows and welcome to 1919 News. The United States Supreme Court has spoken. With a 7-2 split decision, and 4 young idealists have to pay the price for their lives. Molly Steimer, a slip of a girl, is doomed to 15 years in prison. Jacob Abrams, Samuel Lippman, Hyman Lakowski, none of them more than a youth, are to spend 20 years each behind prison bars. Why? Well, these four youth were caught throwing leaflets from a window of a building in New York City. One leaflet denounced the sending of American troops to Russia, and a second leaflet, in Yiddish no less, denounced the war and U.S. efforts to impede the Russian Revolution and curtail production of weapons to be used against Russian revolutionaries. Tonight we have with us our ruling and reasoning specialist, Morgan Gates. Morgan, what can you tell us about the majority opinion?
Well, Meredith, it looks like the defendants were charged with 4 different counts. Each of the first 3 counts dealt with conspiring to unlawfully utter, print, write, and publish. The 4th count was a little bit different, though, because the defendants were charged with conspiring unlawfully and willfully, and inciting and advocating the curtailment of production of product necessary to the war. Justice John Clark relied on the bad tendency test to reach this decision.
Morgan, please tell us more about this bad tendency test.
Well, Meredith, this principle was formulated in Patterson versus Colorado in 1907, and it permits restriction of freedom of speech by government if it is believed that it has a sole tendency to incite or cause illegal activity. Ironically, this test was overturned with the clear and present danger test earlier this year in the landmark case of Schenck versus the United States. However, this bad tendency test surely prevailed in Abrams versus United States.
You know, that is so interesting. Now, what was their reasoning for this decision? Come now, I mean, did they have some sort of explanation for these things?
Well, actually, Meredith, Justice Clark released a statement that explained the outcome fairly well by saying that the leaflets, quote, sufficiently show that while the immediate occasion for this particular outbreak of lawlessness may have been resentment caused by our government sending troops into Russia as a strategic operation against the Germans in the Eastern battlefront, yet the plain purpose of their propaganda was to excite, at the supreme crisis of the war, disaffection, sedition, riots, and, as they hoped, revolution in this country for the purpose of embarrassing and, if possible, defeating the military plans of the government in Europe.
My goodness, this is worse than I thought. So you're telling me the courts felt like the purpose of these hoodlums was to cause contention in America over the war?
Why, yes. Justice Clark also stated, and I quote yet again, the manifest purpose of this publication was to create an attempt to defeat the war plans of the government of the United States by bringing upon the country the paralysis of a general strike, thereby arresting the production of all munitions and other things essential to the conduct of the war.
Well, take a breath there, Morgan. That's quite the verdict there.
But it's also important to realize, Meredith, that although the leaflets did not incite immediate resistance, the materials or speech had a tendency to encourage violent resistance, and thereby they were guaranteed no protection by the First Amendment.
Well, thank you, Morgan, for your in-depth insight on the majority opinion of Abrams versus the United States. And for more information, check out our website at byuicom.net. Actually, that's another station where I just got fired, so never mind. And now on to news. We have our Russian correspondent reporting live from Russia, Melissa Sirais. Melissa, it's wonderful to have you on the show via satellite tonight. Satellite and tonight, that rhymes.
Thanks, Meredith.
Melissa, could you please explain to us what the dissenting judges had to say in regards to this case?
Sure. Well, you see, Meredith, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes and Louis Brandeis dissented and said that the more speech protective standard, the clear and present danger test, ought to be applied to overturn that conviction.
Now, Melissa, what is this clear and present danger test?
Well, this phrase was coined by Justice Holmes in Schenck versus the United States concerning the ability of the government to regulate speech against the draft.
Well, now, what did Justice Holmes have to say about the case?
Well, he said, I quote, "The United States constitutionally may punish speech that produces or is intended to produce a clear and imminent danger, he argued that the activity with the intent was more likely to cause such a result than a comparable activity without such intent. He also said that the second leaflet is the only one that affords even a foundation for the charge, and that, however, he still feels that the only object the papers is to help Russia and to stop American intervention there against the popular government, not to impede the United States in the war it was carrying on.
Now, this is the same justice that came up with the marketplace of ideas concept, right?
Why, yes. He explained why they should not have regulated speech content when there was not imminent danger, and he wrote, quote, "The best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market. I think we should be eternally vigilant against the attempts to check the expression of opinions that we loathe and believe to be fraught with death, unless they so imminently threaten immediate interference with the lawful and pressing purposes of the law that an immediate check is required to save the country. Normally, we should leave the correction of evil counsels to time."
Well, thank you, Melissa. Now let's discuss the legal precedent and impact this case is having on our country. We know that cases such as Schenck versus United States and Patterson versus Colorado are all cases that relate somewhat to ABRAMS versus the United States. Morgan, Melissa, please explain to us how these cases are similar.
Well, while we've been talking about this case, it made me think of Schenck versus United States, like you had said earlier. This case involves Schenck mailing circulars to draftees, and the circulars suggested that the draft was a monstrous wrong by the capitalist system. The circulars urged, do not submit to intimidation. In fact, they only advised peaceful actions such as petitioning to repeal the conscription. The result of this case was that Schenck was charged with conspiracy to violate the Espionage Act by attempting to cause insubordination in the military and to obstruct the recruitment.
That's right. Melissa, what do you have to say?
And like you said, Patterson versus Colorado is similar because in this case, Patterson published articles and cartoons which reflected the bad conduct of the justices of the Colorado Supreme Court in handling some pending cases to which he was part of. The Colorado court held him in contempt and sent him to jail to the court, and the court didn't even want to hear his case.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today on 1919 News, but we would like to hear from our viewers. What terrible crime have these young people committed? Have they injured the people of the United States? Have they plotted against the welfare of this nation? Or have they committed some other heinous crime? Tell us what you think by calling 1-800-1919-NEWS. Thanks for being with us tonight.